Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Shawn Ryan Show. This week is a fascinating episode. We talk about two different topics and then we tie them in. First topic is all about human consciousness. Second topic is all about artificial intelligence. And why we're covering these two topics, we're tying them together because we are talking about how artificial intelligence is going to manipulate the entire human population through the algorithm of human emotion. Pretty fascinating stuff and scary. There's good news at the end of this, though, so, some of these can get kind of heavy. On another note, we have noticed a lot of you are repurposing our content, creating your own content from these episodes. We love it. We thought we'd make it super easy on you. So if you go below in the description, we have a folder down below that has all kinds of raw reels that we've cut for you guys. So you can take them, create whatever you want with it. All we ask is that you tag Shawn Ryan Show in your content. You can monetize it, make money off it, whatever you want to do. Just link back to the show. And guess what? If we like it, we'll repost it on our own social media channels. So there's that. Once again, that link's below. Ladies and gentlemen, please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Tell us how we're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Shawn Webb from the Monroe Institute to the Shawn Ryan Show. Shawn Webb, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure
Shawn
to be
Webb,
here.
welcome to the Shawn Ryan Show.
I know, right?
First Shawn I've interviewed.
That's cool.
So, but man, we've been going back and forth for, we first had contact back in 2020, I believe.
Yeah.
And we've been going back and forth for a while. And man, we had a very fascinating phone conversation. And last night you just blew my mind at dinner. And man, I've been looking forward to this interview. I'm really excited to talk to you about all this stuff. Human consciousness, the Monroe Institute,
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
This is going to be a hell of an episode.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It kind of blew my mind when we were talking a few weeks ago about like something else. And you're like, what's going on with your work? And, and we talked about how my mind stuff was bleeding into artificial emotional intelligence. And then all of a sudden, like a week ago, all these headlines came out, like Elon Musk stopping his schedule to go fly to Congress to implore them to pause or put regulations on AI development. And the heads of state and AI development, like the head tech people, are all like, maybe we need to put a pause on this for a little while. And then like a few days ago, the top Google engineer for AI resigned in fear. And that's like not hyperbole, that's like the headline. Like he admits that he left Google because of the fear of what he helped create, and that he wants to get away from Google and start talking about the dangers of AI, and that he regrets working on it for the last 10 years. It's like, holy shit, we need to talk about this.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's very concerning. I don't even have I have a small fraction of how this is going to affect us, but
Yeah.
I think that this makes humans completely irrelevant in a lot of different sectors in today.
Well, it's certainly going to affect everybody listening to this, like everyone who is in earshot of this conversation is going to be affected by it. But the good news is there's a way that we can talk about it and have everybody understand what's going on here. And we can explain it from the very simplistic nature of what AI is all about. And we'll take all the uncertainty out of the fear. There's certainly some things that we need to be concerned about moving into the future. But we can explain it like within the guise of this show. Everybody will have an amazing understanding of where this is going, why people are concerned about it, what we can do about it to protect ourselves as individuals and human beings from the effects that this stuff may have on us in the future, and maybe a way out to make sure that, you know, an artificial general intelligence doesn't take over the show and start running the world and we'll never have control again. Because there's a small potential for that to actually occur. That's not science fiction. That's like...
Is that really small?
Well,
I feel like it's a lot more imminent than...
Everybody's freaking out about it, but I think, like, I've been in this space, like, I've been talking about the dangers of where we're going for, like, the last 10 years. And now, Yuval Harari, who's one of those guys up there who has the credibility and all that stuff, is starting to say the same thing as that I've been saying for a long time. And we're getting to the point where everybody's starting to understand and get their mind wrapped around where this is going to go, how fast it's going to go, what the particular dangers are of artificial intelligence to influence human behavior, which is the real danger. Because when it comes down to it, our minds are very hackable. And I'll explain a little bit of that so that people can, everybody be like, my mind's not hackable. It absolutely is. Like, everyone can be influenced. And a computer system and artificial intelligence is on the cusp of figuring out how to do that. And that's what we need to protect ourselves against, because at that point, you're talking about the ability of an artificial intelligence being able to use simulated, real fake videos and real fake audio to simulate that they're a human being and sign you up for, a special task force or whatever it is, start depositing money in your bank so that you think you're working for the good guys. And all of a sudden you're working for an artificial intelligence that's arming you, equipping you, funding you, and it has an army, a human army to defend its artificial intelligence goals. That's where we're at.
Wow. That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, and it's no bullshit. I will explain from soup to nuts, like hopefully in this episode, how, first of all, the human mind can be hacked, which is a cool thing because then everybody will be able to hack their own minds, which is awesome. There's a cool, really awesome side effect to be able to take that and then make your life amazing from it. But then from there, it's a really short leap to say, okay, so here's how you can do it. But then here's how an artificial intelligence is going to identify those same patterns and be able to do it if you're not up to speed on how to hack your own mind. It'll be doing it for you.
I mean, you don't have to answer this yet because I know we're going to go into it in the episode, but you had brought up for all the people that, my mind can't be hacked. I mean, there's probably at least 50% of the people listening right now are saying that in their own head.
Yeah.
And
wait till the first half of the show.
To me, the first thing that comes to my mind is for those people that are like, I'm unhackable. Every time you experience a strong emotion, such as anger, jealousy, all these things, would you say that, I feel like that's your mind being hacked?
Yeah,
You're
to a
being
point.
influenced.
Human emotions are the primary driving mechanism for us to take action. From a certain standpoint, you can break down the physiology and the process within your mind and lay it all out on a piece of paper, and you can actually draw it, and you can draw the custom variables that make you an individual compared to all the other 800 billion people on the planet. But there's a process that is static within the physiology of a human that takes that custom information but runs it through the same exact process that everybody else uses. Now, if you start to identify what things are on this self map, we'll talk about it, but what those things are for an individual, then the other side of the equation is your perception and appraisal of what's going on in your mind and what you think about it, how you feel about it, et cetera. But that results in your emotional output. And so if you can put perceptions, false or otherwise or targeted, into a person's perception where you know what they care about and how they're going to react to things, you can put information in there that results in an emotional reaction that will drive them into action potentially at a particular time window, to a particular location, with a particular emotional mix, and all of a sudden you're communicating and controlling human beings either individually or en masse, based on like, they could send information to you to get you to a certain location. They could send me different information that's pertinent to me that'll get me to the same location. Then all of a sudden you got a drone strike or you're being arrested or whatever it is. And it used custom information based on you and I are as individuals, but it got us to the same location or to the same action or the same end result, right? Like we're selling a stock or buying a stock or, liquidating all of our funds or, going to a certain location or taking a certain action. That's what we're talking about here, is the ability to influence people on a scale of up to, the number of cell phones on the planet, where you can literally deliver information to a person's pocket in their face, at a granularity of understanding what each individual needs to see, hear, feel to get them to take the action that you want them to take on an automated basis, 24/7, 365, no need for lunch breaks, and no need for pay.
This is fascinating stuff. Let me give you a proper introduction before we dive in too deep, because
Sure.
I'm dying to dig in. So, Shawn Webb, you're a U.S. Navy veteran. What did you do in the Navy? Were you in the intelligence?
No, I was kind of. I mean, I was tertiary. I was working with surveillance technologies and stuff that's still classified, but I was kind of a tech geek.
Okay, we won't go into that. You're an expert on the human mind and human emotion. You started your civilian career as a systems engineer in supercomputing. You built a career in high tech. You had a startup at the Advanced Technologies Development Center at Georgia Tech. You are now a speaker. You've spoken to some very powerful pioneers in a lot of different spaces, one of which I believe, did you say they won the Nobel Peace Prize last year?
Well, I've had conversations with those folks. I've had multiple conversations with 2 Nobel winners, but I didn't officially present formally in front of them. But there's some stuff that I put out there that they're really interested in talking about.
You have some very important people that are paying very close attention to you. And that says a lot in itself. You're also an author. You've written a few books, one coming out soon. What is that book titled?
It's going to be The Human Mind Owner's Manual.
When is that coming out?
Man, I'm hoping by the end of this year. It's like regular life keeps getting in the way of me finishing this thing. But I'm hoping by the end of the year.
You're an official ambassador to the Monroe Institute. For those of you that do not know what the Monroe Institute is, I'm going to totally butcher this, but I will say this. The Central Intelligence Agency and the Monroe Institute have done a multitude of studies together on remote viewing.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into a little bit more about the Monroe Institute?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's the most premier research center for consciousness expansion on the East Coast of the United States, most definitely. It's a place where, like you said, the history behind it was they sent the early remote viewers for the CIA and other military intelligence to that location to be able to utilize technology that assisted them in making better target viewings and also faster recoveries. And so for a number of years, that was the place where remote viewers got trained for CIA and other military applications for the U.S. government. And that was classified for the longest time. You couldn't even talk about it. And still to this day, they'll deny that they use remote viewers. But, the writing's on the wall of, Lou Elizondo has admitted he was connected with remote viewing. And, he's brand new on the scene of, running ATIP and for the Pentagon, the UFO stuff. Like, he was one of those guys. It's like, well, you guys are denying that this existed, yet here's another guy who's in the mix.
Aren't the studies are released, though?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that got released, and they put out a documentary about remote viewing that was called Third Eye Spies, and that was with Russell Targ, who partnered with Hal Puthoff to put that whole program together for the government, to put some science behind it, because they really needed a good program to be able to say, okay, we're going to do this double blind. We're going to make sure that there's no interference. We want to make sure that the data that we're giving through these remote viewings is accurate, that it's useful. And so he got a lot of stuff declassified so that he could talk about it. And then they turned it into that documentary. And that's how I got tuned into the idea of Joe McMoneagle, who's a teacher at the remote viewing program at Monroe Institute, and who has just a storied existence of successes in remote viewing for the military and special operations forces and National Security Council, and they gave him the Legion of Merit regarding his ability to sit in his house in Virginia and tell you what's going on inside a Russian facility underground somewhere in the tundra of northern Russia.
Man.
And he was right.
This stuff is, I mean, this stuff is incredible.
Yeah.
You know, it's the kind of stuff that people, they can't wrap their head around it. And it's all coming out now that everything you thought was bullshit is turning out to be 100% real. And our own government is utilizing this stuff and has been for decades.
Yeah.
But we're gonna do an entirely separate episode on remote viewing in the Monroe Institute. You also are a coach of mind mastery and emotional intelligence for corporate executives. You have 1.5 million subscribers on TikTok. What is your handle on TikTok?
It's Mind Hacking Happiness.
Mind Hacking Happiness. Go check them out on TikTok. And you're working to forward the development of artificial compassion for computer systems, which might just save us from the runaway AI.
Let's hope.
So we got a lot to dive into.
Yeah.
Before we dive into it.
Oh, nice. I got the gummy bears. Holy cow.
Hold on. How do you know?
Because the other guests
You watch
are all
the show.
Yeah, I do. I love these episodes, man. You're fucking killing it, by the way. I got you again.
Oh, thank you.
So I made that up for me, and my wife like barely lets me wear it, but that's I thought that fit for you too.
I could use this. I could definitely use this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
I
welcome.
can love you without reacting to your mental nonsense.
Yeah.
I got to work on that.
My
That's a
wife
virtue.
made me change the word bullshit to nonsense.
Oh, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And just so you know, those gummy bears are legal in all 50 states. You can drive anywhere with them, fly anywhere with them.
Nice.
And not worry about getting arrested.
Awesome.
Although the other kinds are, those are fun too.
Yeah.
So, but, well, Shawn, how did you go from this high-tech job? You're in a Fortune 100 company making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you pretty much gave that all up to study human consciousness.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it was in that world of being in high tech that, I got a lot of success early on. And I was making a bunch of money, and I was a single dude, pretty girlfriend, great friends. Like, my life was full of the right answers. And so I just purchased a house on a double lot in Atlanta at the age of 27 by myself, no co-signers, like just, balling. And I'd filled it with, a bunch of cool stuff and gloss black piano and all this, weight set and all this stuff that I wanted when I was younger because I grew up in poverty. And then all of a sudden, it turned out I was a little talented in tech. And then the money just started flowing because, I was working for a supercomputing company, and it was just they're $1 million computers. So when you sell some of those things and you work on them, you get paid a lot of money. And like at some point, we'll have to talk about how I was shipping computers to Area 51. That was a cool little job. But I was on the front porch of this house, and I was looking out across the extra lot that I had, and I was like, okay, so I've got all this stuff, and I got friends coming over. I'm waiting for the installers for the stereo system that are coming to put the stuff in so we can have this big party at my house. And I'm like, all right, well, so what's next? And something about that, because I was thinking about maybe putting a gazebo or something out in the side yard or whatever and wiring it up for sound, but that was what I was thinking about. And I was like, wait a second, hold on. I went from food stamps and living in a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in rural Indiana, and 10 years later, where, I was poor as shit, I'm on the other side of the coin, making good income, success from, American dream perspective. It's like I got everything. There's no wrong answer. It's like I'm not unfulfilled. I feel like I have a good relationship with God. There's nothing really missing for me. Yet here I am with all the things that I was ever told that I should have for happiness. And I'm already looking for what's next. And something in my mind clicked. It's like, wait a second, you're not happy with all of this stuff? It's like, where's the finish line going to be? Like, what is it going to be that finally says, okay, I'm good, I'm done? And I started to analyze it, and then I started to read a little bit about, psychology and whatnot. And it was like, there's going to be no stopping point. There's this thing called a hedonic treadmill where, and it's a part of the the part of the nervous system, not the immune system, but the nervous system where like your nervous system reports the differences in things. Like you smell a scent for the first 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden you don't smell it anymore because let's say you wake up in the middle of the night and the gas is on and you smell it. Well, it woke you up because it went from low to high. And it alerted you and said, okay, there's a big difference in the gas smell. But then after 10 minutes, it goes from high to high, and it stops reporting on the difference of things, right? And you got to get out of the house. That's why the firemen say, get out of the house if you smell gas because you won't smell it for very long, but it'll kill you. Because your nervous system only measures the differences in things. And so in reality, what that does to our life is when we start making financial accumulation and the brand new car is really cool for the first few months that you're driving it, and then all of a sudden it gets to be old hat. That's your nervous system normalizing to the things that you've attained already in life. And then you start looking for what's the difference? How can I get more? And that never stops. And that's why these billionaires are always looking to pile more money on top, more success, more businesses, more accolades, right? Oh, I'm not the richest man in the world yet. Let's do that, right? Mm-hmm. And they're chasing because the nervous system always normalizes to what you have. And so that's what was going on in my mind that I was just learning about. It was like, I've got all this stuff. What's next? And I was like, if I follow this pattern, I'm going to be chasing that my whole life.
That's interesting you say that. I am coming to that. I've come to that realization that it's all just shit.
Yeah.
It is all just shit.
Yeah.
And if you let that shit get to you, it you're just feeding and creating a monster.
Yeah.
It's greed.
Yeah. Most definitely.
It's greed.
So I started looking for more. I was like, okay, what is it that I'm missing about my internal sense of who I am and what I want in life, et cetera. And I started to do some reading on global religions, trying to figure out, is there something I missed in my religion that maybe, there's some other answers that I need to, or what could be commonalities that could be brought into my existence that could maybe illuminate me into something else that I need to be doing, et cetera. And I found some patterns of commonalities in religion, which were really interesting. But then I read a book on T. Suzuki's Introduction to Zen. And I learned about meditation, which was a foreign idea to me at the time because, I grew up Christian and I went to church. I was president of the youth group for 4 years. I was like in it. And at that point, I started to understand that there was this thing called Satori. And I didn't know what that was. It's just a word for their explanation about a moment of perfection that allows you to understand absolutely everything.
I want to tell you all about this new meat delivery service I found called Moink. What I really, really like about Moink is they are from a small, rural farm town in Missouri, LaBelle, Missouri, right by where I grew up. And I love supporting small town business USA. Now, when I started looking into Moink, they educated me on the meat industry, and I want to share with you all a couple of facts. According to Moinked magazine, 60% of all pork is produced by one company in the U.S., and that is 100% owned by the Chinese. 4 companies control over 80% of the meat industry in the United States. More than 10,000 different additives are allowed in the U.S. food supply. 99% of chicken, 95% of hogs, 78% of cattle in the U.S. are raised in confinement buildings or feedlots. It means they're not moving around freely. 80% of the antibiotics consumed in the U.S. are fed to animals. Here's a stat. In 2016, 18.4 million pounds of antibiotics were sold for livestock. And that's what you're eating. Suicide rates amongst farmers are the highest than any other profession, and that includes veterans, believe it or not. I found that alarming. Now, here's what Moink is doing to combat some of this stuff, which I really appreciate. Their livestock is 100% born and raised and harvested humanely in the United States of America. Their farms practice regenerative agricultural methods. They are free of GMOs, antibiotics, and all hormones. Their Alaska salmon is wild caught. Their beef and lamb are grass-fed and grass-finished. Their boxes ship from rural America, right in small-town Missouri. Love it. Their chicken and pork are pasture-raised. So, guys, check them out. Moink. Keep America farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/SRS. Right now, listeners on this show get free bacon in your first box. It will be the best bacon you will ever taste, but it's only for a limited time. It's spelled Moink, MOINK, box.com/SRS. That's moinkbox.com/SRS.
And I'm like, well, what's that all about?
Interesting.
I'm looking for answers, so maybe
Satori,
yeah. And so I started meditating, and I was horrible at it because I didn't know what it was. I'd look it up and try to read about it and whatnot. And then I started to read articles on websites and stuff. I'm like, well, this actually tracks back into the Christianity that I know because Jesus meditated. It says right so in the Bible, 40 days, yada, out in the desert. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll try it. And so I started meditating. I started calming my mind. And then I started reading more about Zen, which to me is more of a philosophy of mind mastery than anything. And I worked on using the 800-pound gorilla of my mind to tame the 800-pound gorilla of my mind. Because from a practical perspective, they just want to cease all conscious thought and then find out what happens next. And so that's what I focused on. I was like, I want to shut my mind completely down. I want to hear nothing but silence and then see what I can hear from there. And there's a crazy thing that happened that for the last 20 years, I've been trying to figure out what the physiology and the science is behind it. But a different experience of consciousness arose within me when I got to a point of complete quietude. And it blew my mind. It was so dramatic and life-changing and such a weird experience that I literally thought I was dying. Like I zipped out of my body into the center of the universe and all of a sudden understood absolutely everything about how this whole universe works and like the crazy experience that came from shutting down conscious thought in my mind reset absolutely everything within me and brought me a ton of information that I didn't have like the day before. And so some of the stuff that I got out of it, and I talk about that experience in the blue book that I wrote, Volume 2 of Mind Hacking Happiness. So if you're interested in pick that up or whatever. But the information that I brought back from that was real, valid information on how the human mind works, how we create our own pain and suffering, like the process that we go through to create our pain and suffering. And I put it into a theory, and I was just another guy with a theory on, here's how your pain and suffering works. But I put it into a very specific logical process flow of values and groupings of things and the process that your mind follows to create your bullshit. And I call it your mental bullshit. And then between 2007 and 2013, all the science came out, the peer-reviewed, published major journal science that proved every bit of what I had come back with correct.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so then I was like, okay, so now this raises a whole bunch of other questions in my mind but besides having a practical understanding of how you create your own pain and suffering and bullshit and how you can turn it down, et cetera. Now science has proven that's correct. Okay, so now a whole new set of questions comes like, where did that come from? Like, what information did I tap into that allowed me, a guy who has, a psychology 101 course in his past from a community college at some point, to come with a model that can explain the human mind and how it works?
Well, before we move into the next set of questions,
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. I want to say them out loud because I'll forget. But one, how long did it take you to get into that type of meditation? How long did it take you? So I'd like to talk about that. 2, what was the initial download? So let's start with 1.
Okay. So 1, it wasn't very long, because I just went at it. In fact, it was less than 2 months that I started meditating that this weird thing occurred. And then I zipped out of my body and went off into the middle of the universe and understood everything. And then when I was coming back, I was losing a lot of it. I was losing all the stuff that I understood. I was coming back into my existence. In fact, one of the portions of the existence was, okay, time to go back. And I was like, what do you mean go back? I was like, I don't want to go back. What are you talking about? And then it was like, you're going back. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe, reincarnation is real. I'm going to go back and be a human baby, whatever it was. And then I realized I was coming back to my body, my existence. And I was like, well, that sucks. I mean, come on, really?
Yeah.
I'm here in the middle of everything and I understand everything and I got to be one with the whole universe and yada, yada, and you're putting me back in this shit? And it's, but then, I started losing a lot of stuff and I was like, no, wait. I don't want to lose everything. You can't just show this to me and not allow me to help folks. And it was, the feeling that I got was like, well, what do you want? And I was like, well, let's knock out this pain and suffering thing. Let's knock out, the human limitation of being controlled by fear and controlled by anger and controlled by sadness and all the things that limit our existence and stop us from being, joyful and happy all the time. And the kind of feeling, the message I got back was, yeah, okay, so you aren't the first. And that was kind of a joke, kind of a poke at, a lot of the other masters dipped into the same thing and look what they did. I'm like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot anyway. We'll see what happens. And so it was just within a couple months, though.
A couple of months you were able to tap in?
Yeah.
I've been meditating off and on I started after my first psychedelic experience, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And that was roughly a year and 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And I've felt the oneness one time.
Yeah.
And that was meditating outside in nature. I'm just going to tell you what I do, you know, and maybe you can critique me because I want to go to the center of the universe.
I know, right?
In meditation. So I put headphones on. I listen to frequency music like the stuff we were listening when we were setting up the photo shoot and everything for this episode. I do that, and then have you ever heard of a Rife machine?
Yeah.
So I know you're very familiar with frequency. So I put a Rife machine on, and I put it on my feet. Sometimes I put it on my hands. Sometimes I put it on both. So basically, for those listening who don't know what a Rife machine is, a Rife machine sends a series of frequencies through your body, and it's kind of holistic medicine.
Yeah.
And you probably know a lot more about this than I do.
I just got a Royal delivered to my house, the Royal Rife machine.
Really?
Yeah.
So from what I understand, the Rife machine, it does all kinds of good things for you, but it can break up bacteria, it can break up viruses. They say it can break up cancers, cancer cells, and from what I understand, it's also very grounding. It puts you at the right frequency that we're supposed to be operating at. I even put a grounding sheet on my bed.
Wow.
Do you know what a grounding sheet is?
Yeah, totally. I tried to buy one. I got one off of Amazon, and it wasn't really doing a whole lot. And I tested it with a multimeter. It wasn't even connected. Like they were selling a sham. Like they, I believe in the science because I've read the reports and read the studies. Like that's real science, real stuff that'll help you. But the stuff they sell on Amazon doesn't, like the ground doesn't have a connection to the mat.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, I've been looking for a new one then. but yeah, so that's, and then I have a bad back, so I sit in a love sack. like a
Okay.
big beanbag chair,
Yeah.
and just try to totally relax. Sometimes I can get far and and the way I do it is when I meditate, I kind of let, how do I explain this? I'm not the greatest at controlling my thoughts.
Yeah.
And so how I do it is I try to let every thought in my head play out. And sometimes this could take hours.
Yeah.
Most of the time I don't have hours.
Okay.
You know, I'll do it if I get a 45-minute one in, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah.
Even if I haven't accomplished anything and I just sat by myself for 45 minutes, I feel good about it. But
Yeah.
every once in a while, all the thoughts, it's like every thought will play through my head,
Yeah.
and I'll get to the point where I'm thinking about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realize I'm thinking about nothing. And I snap out of it, and I don't know how long I was actually thinking about nothing. So the way I'd like to describe it is if you're looking down, picture your thoughts like clouds.
Right.
And the clouds pass by, and then another thought comes in your head.
Yeah.
And it's good stuff. It's things that are bothering you. It's things that I have to do today, things that I have to do next week, and guilt, and all these different emotions and thoughts are just going through my head. And every once in a while, every thought goes through my head. Everything plays out, and it's 100% calmness.
Yeah.
But I don't know how long I'm in that calmness, or I'm in that state.
Yeah, in that state, there's a separation of time, right? Where time just kind of doesn't become a thing anymore. Mm-hmm. What you just perfectly explained, well done, by the way, is a meditative state of vipassana. And so there's a word for it. It comes from like this ancient Buddhist practice where you simply just observe your thoughts, but you don't add anything to them. Like your thoughts come in, but you don't really interact with them. You just kind of let them do their thing, and like you said, the cloud floating by, and then it floats out. And then you're just waiting for the quiet. And that's, from my perspective, that's your subconscious trying to raise things for your awareness. And we'll get into, how your brain is your organ of survival. It starts throwing things up that says, should we pay attention to this? Should we pay attention to this? And your non-reaction to that proves two cool things. One, that you're not your mind, but you can observe your mind, which means there always needs to be a space between an observer and the observed. So you're proving to yourself that your own consciousness isn't the product of your mind, which is a really cool thing to notice. But then the other thing is,
Can you say that again?
that your consciousness is separate from your mind. Like if you can observe your mind from your consciousness, you're proving to yourself that it's not the same thing. That the observer that's sitting in the chair watching your mind isn't your mind, because a tooth can't touch itself or can't bite itself. A fingertip can't touch itself. An eyeball can't see itself without some distance in a mirror. There needs to be a space between the observer and the observed. And so at any point that you're observing your mind, you're proving to yourself you aren't your mind. Your mind is something that's doing, that's working for you, certainly in assistance of your existence, of your physiology. But your consciousness is something different. And when you dig into that, that's your true essence. It's not your mind and the things that are happening in your mind and the emotions that are arising and all this other stuff. That's a process of your physiology. You're the thing inside working your physiology, driving your physiology, experiencing this human existence, but you're not this thing and the operation of your mind if you can see your mind, because there has to be some distance between the observer and the observed.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating stuff. So what was your first download?
So the first thing that I got was the last thing that I lost everything, like the understanding of the whole universe, and I totally understood Satori at that point from a Zen perspective, right? And I don't think the Zen folks are right. I just think it was a practical method for them to get to the point that we naturally can find as humans, that we're designed to find, that puts us in touch with everything. But the stuff that I grabbed on the way back when I knew I was coming back to be me, and that I wanted to help teach people, I still had access to some stuff that I, didn't have access to in my human life in this expanded consciousness realm. And I said, let me bring back the process of pain and suffering. Let me bring back how the human mind works so that we can explain it to folks so that they can start to take control of their mind, adjust the variables that they need to adjust to make their life amazing. And I got that stuff. And I put it in a couple of books that I then published. And 96% of the folks who are finding it are rating them 5 stars. And they're saying, this stuff changed my life. So I'm like, thank God I grabbed the right stuff on the way back. It's like there was so much information out there in the field that I could have tried to bring back and explain. And I grabbed just the right mix of stuff that I didn't know about, but that I kind of figured out how to unpack over time and put into a couple of books and some, whatever videos that I put out on the internet for free and all this other stuff. It's like, that's what I want to deliver.
We'll link all that, your book and all everything will be linked below.
Nice. Yeah, so I put that into the stuff that I try to communicate, and it helps people take control of their mind and shows them the control knobs that they can take and change the things that'll change their whole emotional landscape for the rest of their life. Because if you think about it, emotions are the things that drive us, like we talked about at the top, but it's also the things that can ruin our existence. Like it's the sadness and the fear and the anger and the worry and regret and all that stuff that permeates your mind because you're not taking control of your mind and adjusting the variables to turn that stuff down. Science shows us in fMRI studies that you can grab those variables and literally turn your brain on or off in certain areas to hack your mind, which is why I was, the moniker of the book was Mind Hacking Happiness. Like there's a way to take control of those variables and literally control the brain reactivity that creates the stuff that causes trials and troubles and tribulations, et cetera, but then can also free you from that whole process, which changes your life and then changes the lives of those around you, because not only is it just your personal existence is better, which then affects all the cool people around you that you love and don't want to hurt, but then you start to bleed into them, and your positivity and your control of understanding your own shit can be passed on to them. And like my kid is one of the most emotionally intelligent kids in his class and has no problem with a lot of the things that middle schoolers will have a problem with, because he's got that presence of understanding how his mind works, and he understands where his fear comes from. He understands what his frustrations are, and he can turn them down at will at 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how do you even begin to control this?
Well, the cool thing is there's a hardwired hack in your mind that helps you control it for you. So the easiest way to explain this is, like when you go, your brain is your organ of survival, okay? So it's there to help you figure out what's a danger and what's not, okay? So when you walk by a coil on the ground, there's this thing called your limbic system, and specifically your amygdala, that'll look down, glance out of the corner of your eye and say, oh my God, that's a snake, right? And so the fear kicks in to your amygdala and it starts dumping adrenaline into your system to prepare for fight or flight to get you away from the threat, okay? So at the moment that you look down and you see that coil on the ground is not a snake, but it's a hose, okay? Your brain, as your organ of survival, has to have a way to turn off your negative shit immediately, because the adrenaline dump and all the stuff that's happened a moment ago to prolong your survival is now going to limit your survival by wasting those resources that you would need to run away from a hose, which you don't. Right? But you may need those resources 100 yards down the line when a bear walks out of the woods in front of you and you need that adrenaline, right? So there needs to be a way for your thinking mind to turn off your negative reaction to that snake now hose. And so there's a specific circuit, and we don't have to go deep in the weeds of neuroscience, but there's a specific circuit in the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex that literally sends a signal back to your limbic system, says, shut the fear off. We don't need it anymore. Stop the adrenaline dump, and it reacts immediately and turns off the negative reactivity that your mind has going on at the moment, because you don't need that fear. There's a way to hack that system.
This happens subconsciously.
Yeah, subconsciously. It's helping. Your brain is there to help you, right? Your brain is there to do what you need it to do to help your survival. And that's why, it'll change in form and function. Like you learn how to shoot a basketball and all of a sudden it becomes muscle memory. It's not really muscle memory. That's your brain saying, I'm going to take this over for a subconscious process to say, we're always going to hit that three, right? You learn how to play piano. All of a sudden it becomes automatic where you just start the song and now you're just listening to it as your body's playing the notes. Right, you do crossword puzzles. Your brain, your subconscious mind works those things quicker, starts to aligning this thought process to say, oh, I've seen that clue before. And you're filling out your crossword puzzle faster based on what intention that you've set for it. Well, over time, when you start managing your emotions, it'll start doing the same thing. And so if you're like a mess psychologically in life and you start to take control of your emotional landscape, over time, your mind makes you that Zen master walking around, observing the world exploding around him and not really reacting to it unless there's something directly that needs to be done. That's a cool kind of place to be where, life could be going to hell in a handbasket and yet you're calm and controlled and can make intelligent decisions based on the information that you have ahead of you.
So this all came to you in one meditation setting.
It was a hell of a meditation, but yeah, and that's what expanded consciousness is all about. Because this whole thing, for me, the experience itself, felt like it was thousands to millions of years long.
Really?
Like I learned that much stuff. Now I lost a lot of it coming back into the limited physiology that I have. Like we're really dumb as human beings. Like we totally overestimate our intelligence level compared to what there is to know. But when you dip into that space of expanded consciousness, and I've got theories about this, we can talk about this later, but you're dipping into like a non-local awareness that transcends, just like quantum mechanics does, transcends space and time. Like quantum mechanics is showing us that in that realm that creates space and time, it is beyond the effects of space and time. Like, you can have backwards in time reactions in quantum mechanic experiments. Like nobody understands quantum mechanics, so I don't want to profess that I understand what's going on. But there are experiments that show that we can have reactivity backwards in time based on stuff that happens in the future. And they've proven this over and over and over, and 100% of the experiments show that this is the way it works. Well, I think that there's also a non-local component to consciousness that does the same thing. That when you're in that pure conscious awareness space, you're beyond the space and time influence. And so you can experience things off into the distance in this consciousness expansion space, get a ton of information that you wouldn't have time to experience in the hour-long meditation or however long you were gone. And then you come back and you've got all of this experience and all of this understanding that would have taken lifetimes to learn.
Wow.
It's crazy.
We'll dive deeper into that in a future episode.
Yeah.
But so let's get into some of the stuff that we need to cover before we get into the AI manipulation.
Yeah.
And so let's go into how the brain works with consciousness, because I know you want to explain some of that.
Yeah. So
before we get into how AI is going to manipulate the entire human population.
Yeah, because one of the things that I was thinking is we covered like how to hack your own mind. And then it's a small jump to say, okay, here's how an artificial intelligence will hack your mind if you're not taking control of it. And this will be an amazing, cool little talent for anybody who's listening to be able to hack their own mind, because you can literally take the variables that create who you are in your mind, adjust them, and then take control of your whole emotional landscape, which is awesome. And then you'll understand when you're starting to take control of those things, how somebody else, like news media or an external source of information or an artificial intelligence, will try to do the same thing. And you'll be able to identify when somebody's trying to influence you or control you, which is kind of cool, give you a lot of freedom. But that story starts with back to the limbic system. Like, it's your defense mechanism. It's always scanning your environment for threats, right? And so that's the portion of your brain that is like your survival structure. It says, is this person a threat? Is this car coming towards me a threat? Am I in this line? Is this animal a threat? But then a second question must be asked, a threat to what? And so that becomes the answer that the mind needs. Like, it needs a laundry list. It's just a logic device, right? Our brain is just a logic device of our central nervous system. And it needs a laundry list to define what it is that we need to defend. Like, if we're given a mission to say, defend this. Okay, well, what is this, right? And so that laundry list of stuff becomes our sense of self. And it's hardwired in that our body is right in the center of this map. It's called a self map, which is a kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? A concept that was brought forth by Antonio Damasio, who's a very famous researcher who did a lot of work on self and the understanding of human psychology and why we do the things that we do. And so this self thing, our body's right in the center of it. So when we have a baseball flying at our heads, that's why we dodge out of the way. Subconsciously, we don't even have control. It just happens. Or like when a fly comes flying near our eye, we blink. That's our limbic system controlling the motion of our body to defend our sense of self, which our body's right in the middle of it. So when we have that adrenaline dump of, seeing that wild animal or whatever it is, that's the body being right in the middle of our sense of self map. Now, just a couple of decades ago, they thought that was it. Our body was our sense of self, and that's what our brain is looking to defend. But then a really cool researcher, I've met him, I've interviewed him. His name is Jim Cohn at University of Virginia. He did a study that showed people can actually be mapped to our sense of self, people around us. And he did it through fMRI study to prove that, brains work the way they do and that this is a real thing. He put some folks through an fMRI and he said, okay,
what is an fMRI?
fMRI is it's an MRI machine that scans every cell of your brain, but then it also, through an extra function, looks at the blood flow and the energy flow within the mind itself in real time. So it basically shows you what's going on with the different sections of the brain. So you can look on a monitor and it comes red and blue and different energy sensations and different blood flow tell you what portions of the brain are doing what in any moment that you're looking at it. So he put a group of folks through this study and he said, okay, I'm going to give you a pair of glasses. There's going to be a LED in there. It's going to give you a flash of light. And then we're going to watch your brain for a few seconds. And then we're going to zap the shit out of you on your ankle.
Okay.
So, and it hurt a little bit. I mean, it didn't do any harm, but it was like, whoa, you jump.
You did this?
No, I've had it done before, but wasn't part of that study. But it hurts. It's like a dog zap collar. It's like the same type of thing, but they put it on your ankle. So they give you the flash of light and they watch the brain. And what they were expecting is what they got, which was the fear center in the brain lit up and the correlates in the brain that create our self map, our sense of self, because our body's right in the center of it. And it's like, okay, there's a threat to the body. So fear came out and the sense of self came out and they saw it in the scan. It's exactly what they expected. The second run, they brought a stranger into the room, put him on a gurney next to the subject in the fMRI machine, and said, okay, we're going to give you the flash of light, but we're going to take the ankle zapper off of you and put it on the stranger. And then we're going to watch your brain, and then we're going to zap the other guy. And I'm like, I'm selling cable rights at this point, right? I set up a popcorn machine. Let's have fun with this thing.
So hold on. One guy gets the flashlight.
Yep.
The other guy gets the zap.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are they wanting to happen?
So what they expect to happen is because their body is no longer in threat, because you're zapping somebody else, they're not going to see fear, and they're not going to see the sense of self correlates, right, in the brain. And that's exactly what they got, exactly what they expected. But what they didn't expect to happen, and what changed the world of understanding of sense of self, was what happened on the third run, where they brought in what's called a familiar, which was somebody that you love or somebody that's part of your life, significant other, coworker, child, parent, friend, somebody that means something to you. And they put them on the gurney next to you as you're in the fMRI machine, give you the flash of light, watch your brain, but then they zap somebody that you love. And the thing that surprised them was that they couldn't tell the first scans and the third scans apart.
Really?
Yeah. So the people that we love and the people in our lives get mapped onto our sense of self and use that same simple defensive self programming that our brain uses to defend against the snake or the bear or whatever. That's why we can now be concerned about losing our job, or be concerned about our friend telling us they're about to lose their job, or we're concerned about grandma's cold turning into a bad flu or whatever. Like, we have feelings for the people around us that we love. This is exactly how the brain does it.
Very, consciousness is, it's very fascinating. I've been watching this guy Greg Braden a lot, and I've been trying to get him on here. I'm hoping he takes the bait here soon. But he was talking about a study that was done with photons in a vacuum. Are you familiar with this?
No.
So they put photons into a vacuum, and they put them in there and study how they move around. And at first, they seem no effect. Then they put a strand of DNA in, and the photons attach themselves to the DNA. It sounds like.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to do. They brought in consciousness somehow. So they had somebody watch the photons, and then they had the photons where nobody was watching them. And the photons actually react differently if there's a human being in the room watching the vacuum with the photons in it.
Yeah.
Now, they did a third run where they try to trick the photons, and they watch it through a camera. And if you watch the photons through the camera, they still react the same way as they do if you're in the room watching. But if you're not watching through the camera, then they react the same way as if nobody was in the room and nobody was watching.
Yeah.
How is this?
That's consciousness reaching through the field. And I see that as, if the data needs to be rendered for someone to experience it, that's the loop back through consciousness that makes the loop in quantum mechanics collapse. That wave function is what it's called. That resolves the collapse of a wave function. So if you watch it live or you watch it through a camera, you're watching it, period. And so through non-locality, your need of seeing how that data resolves is what makes that difference occur. It doesn't matter how it's delivered to you, it's delivered to you. But you're wired into consciousness, so it reacts differently because you want to experience that moment. I don't know. There's no scientific proof of that. It's just kind of my little pet theory, but I've been kind of studying this stuff for a while, and that's kind of my hunch.
There was another study. I'm going to just share this just because I think this stuff it blows my mind.
Yeah.
He talks about DNA, and he talks about operating at high and low frequency, high frequency being happiness, gratitude, all that stuff, low frequency being anger, jealousy, fear, things like that. And he says when you're operating at a low frequency, your DNA will actually wind tighter and tighter. And if you are operating, which is a lesser expression of your DNA. And he says, and this is a study. When you're operating at a high frequency, when you're experiencing happiness, gratitude, positive emotions, your DNA will unwind to a full expression to the point where it looks like it's about ready to produce another DNA. And so I'm saying this stuff because I think it fits in with the conversation. I love talking about it. And
it completely does.
It shows anybody who's watching or listening to this how important human emotion is and how it can affect your health.
Absolutely, because the same process that we just talked about with attaching to other people to create emotions, another researcher called Tiffany Burnett White at UAUC proved a self-brand connection gets also mapped onto this. So this is like Ford versus Chevy, right? This is like I'm New York Yankees versus New York Mets. Like this is attachment to ideas, where she showed that attachment to brand also fires the same areas of the brain. And then Sam Harris came along with some of his cohorts and proved that we get attached to religion and we get attached to politics and those ideas, which is why when somebody attacks our religion or politics, we get frustrated. I mean, you just have to go to Facebook to see that argument happening. You could scroll through your news feed and see something like that. That's why, because your mind attaches to an idea, to your sense of self, which then runs your emotional programming through that same defensive self mechanism. But that idea then makes you an individual. Like, you have a different mom than I do. We would defend our moms, but at the same time, I'm not defending your mom as vehemently as you're defending your mom, because your mom's on your self map, my mom's on my self map, and so that drives our emotional reactions associated with those custom things that are on our self map. And it's easy to explain the stress level that you have about stuff in life, because there's a simple equation of emotion with only two variables in it that will control every emotional reaction that you have from the time of your birth to the time of your death. Two variables. And if you can take control of those, you can take control of your entire emotional landscape. One of them is your expectation and or preference, which is automatically set by the stuff that's on your self map. And the expectation or preference rule is the value has to remain status quo or increase in value connected with all this stuff, or we're going to have a problem. And then the other variable is perception, which is what's going on around you, your regular environment, the actions around the environment, the thoughts that are going through your head are perception. So if you have a bad thought about something, that can set off an emotion. These two things are measured against each other. Your expectation and a preference regarding all the stuff that you care about that's on your self map. And then your perception comes through with an appraisal of whether that's positive or negative based on what's going on here. And the equation of emotion has a negative proof in the whole thing. Like, you take one away, you're going to have apathy as your emotional result. You take the expectation or preference away, like you don't care about something, like you could talk to me about who won the Canadian lacrosse high school championship. I don't give a fuck. It's like, I'm going to have apathy about that, right? I may be happy that the team won and had a great time, but that's my connection with humanity in general, right? I'm a human. I love when people succeed at their goals, and so I'm going to have a happy emotion that somebody won and had a great time. I don't give a shit who won. We don't have to have that conversation. So you don't have a perception about something. You're not going to have an emotion about it. Like, if you want somebody to win the Super Bowl and you haven't watched it yet and you don't know who won, you're not going to have an emotional reaction about that result of that game. You'll be like, I really want to know the score of the game because it's already happened. It's over. I'm getting up. I didn't stay up last night. Well, that's an expectation or preference that you would love to know the score of the game based on you not knowing the score. That's an imbalance, and that creates your negative emotion. But you're not going to have any emotion about the game itself until you find out the score. So there's an easy way to explain all of your emotions with two simple variables that if they balance, you have a positive emotion as a result. If they don't balance, you have a negative emotion that's a result. And you can manage the things that are on your self map that can reduce the amount of shit that ruins your day by stop caring about stuff less. Like, I used to be wrapped up in politics and all this other stuff, ruining my day, all the headlines that were coming out, like all the shit that was irking me. I took politics off of my self map and just didn't give a shit about it anymore until, it's time to vote, and I'll do 2 weeks worth of analysis and figure out what I'm going to do. Man, my life got so much more awesome by just taking that one thing off of my self map and not caring about it.
Can you please help me? Because I haven't watched the news in probably a year.
Yeah.
But, I'm in media, that's my new profession is being in media. And so I have to research and I see things and I can't help it. How do I get rid of that? I hate politics. I don't want to look at it. It disgusts me. I think everybody in politics is basically a prostitute. Yeah. And help me. Yeah. How do I get rid of it?
Well, you're doing the right things. You're keeping those perceptions away from you, right? So you have an expectation or preference. Like, you have something on a self map that you care about, a set of ideals, right? A set of beliefs, of way that things should be done, right? And then this ruins your day a lot. So you're staying away from your perception, which is great. I mean, if you just, filter that stuff out and don't bring that into your awareness, without having to throw the things off that you truly care about off your self map, you can reduce the amount of pain and suffering that you're experiencing by reducing the perceptions that you're having to process. So that's cool. So you can do that. There's also a thing in psychology that's big. It's called a reappraisal process, where, like, let's take you getting cut off in traffic. Your perception and the the value that you put on that makes all the difference of how you react to that situation. So if you're in the mindset of this guy cuts you off and you take that as a slight of, he's more important than me, where he's going is more important where I'm going. He just totally told me that, I'm not important enough to take into consideration that he's going to take my lane. Then you're like, fuck you, and you're laying on your horn and flipping him off and all this other stuff. So that's one reaction. But then if you reappraise that, you could say, okay, idiots exist. Wasn't paying attention, whatever. That's going to bring the energy level of your reaction down quite a bit, because that brings the energy that you're putting into the perception lower. It's not an attack on you. It's just a existence of people do stupid shit, and then you can let it roll off. But then if you've got a different perception of that, where, wow, maybe this person's on his way to the hospital to see his dying friend for the last time. You're like, holy shit, take my lane. Get there. I hope you get there, man. Right? So there's a totally different emotional reaction based on how you see things and how you choose to see things in life that can change how you react to things, both subconsciously and consciously. So there's some, you get in there and you start playing with the subtleties of the variables that are in your equation of emotion. You can completely take control of your emotional landscape and the subconscious process that creates the emotions that you then have to deal with.
That's a very subtle change in the thought process.
Yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing is, like, plasticity, just like, you get better playing piano over time or shooting basketball or whatever it is, it will start to help you do that more automatically over time the more you do it, which is the real magic, because you put some effort into it, you learn what the variables are, how you can tweak them, that type of thing. Then your mind gets an idea of where you want it to go. And then it starts to go there for you. And the coolest example of that I have, I'll tell this story. So my mom died a few years back, but before she died, we got her into an assisted living facility, and it was a nice place. But I'd come down once a week and say hi, because it was a drive. But I'd come down once a week to say hi and make sure everything was good, and that she was still liking the food, and they were treating her well, and her room was the way she wanted it. And there was one day where I showed up to the facility. And I knocked on her door, and she opened the door, and you could tell there was something different this time. And she just looked up at me, and she smiled. She goes, "Hi, can I help you?" And still touches me a little bit to this day. But that was the first time that I looked in my mom's eyes and realized that she didn't realize who I was. And so I got 4 older sisters, and I was the son who was 12 years separated by my next older sister, so I was kind of unplanned, but she'd always wanted a boy. And so I was the only son she had, but I was the son she wanted to have in her lifetime. And in that moment, I knew that she no longer had a son that she could identify. And in that moment on my side of the equation, I lost somebody who remembers being my mom. So I kind of lost my mom without losing my mom. I lost all the future hugs with my mom. I lost all the future discussions with my mom. Like, there was a lot to process. And it took me about 3 seconds to go all through that potentially devastating moment where your parent forgets who you are. And I was able to move into the space of, okay, I'm just a nice guy coming by to check on, see how she is. Because I could make it awkward for her to try to fill my need at that point of, hey, Mom, it's me. Please remember me, right? That's my need. That's not her need. That's like saying, let's not do this right now because I'm not ready for it. Like, I can't handle this. And I went into immediate acceptance because of all the times that I'd been practicing emotional regulation and stuff. It took about 3 seconds to process through all of that stuff to say, who do I need to be right now to be what my mom needs? Do I want to cause her harm and embarrassment and scare her that she's losing her memory by saying, I'm your son, and forcing that down her? It's like, I just played it cool and I went into the room and maybe she'll remember in a few minutes. Didn't. And I was trying to gently prod her. I was like, who are, I picture my son. Oh, who are these people? Oh, those are my people. Never remembered me the whole visit.
Wow.
And I could have inserted my need to have a mom and to remind her and say, Mom, it's me, I'm your son. But that's not what she needed at the moment. So I immediately fell into how can I serve her the best? And it was completely releasing my needs and my reactions at that point. And I processed through them. It's not like I repressed them and then I had to go to the car and cry. Bringing up the memory, I get a little bit misty-eyed, but that's because I miss her. It wasn't a thing that came up later and I had to go sob for hours. It was, this is how it is now. And that's totally okay. And I processed through it. And it was gone, and it never came up again. That's the power that you can have, taking control of your own mind and manipulating the variables that create your entire emotional landscape. Because in that moment, I became an immediate service to her at the most optimal level. And I loved that.
How did you react?
It sucked. I was never going to be able to hug my mom again.
Yeah.
From her perspective or her remembering me. I was going to hug a nice old lady who, was kind to me because I seemed familiar.
Man, that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm glad, I'm glad I was able to process through it and not cause additional pain for her based on what I needed. It's like, that's my shit.
Yeah.
I can deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what this thing's all about. I'm like, man, if I could deliver that to other folks, the ability for people to reach into their own minds and turn down their own pain and suffering at will. Because that's what that whole thing was that we talked about at the top of the show, where your brain has that circuit to turn off your negative shit when it needs to. Like, that's what this is all about. This is hacking the mind. This is putting the perceptions in place or taking the things off your self map and adjusting things to where your subconscious mind no longer gives you as much trouble as it did. And this is where we make the short leap into, computers then, or artificial intelligence, putting perceptions in front of you based on what it knows about you and your self map to say, I'm going to emotionally manipulate you into action. Right? If you can understand how simple the human mind is and the variables that come into play are really simple, you can start to understand how an artificial intelligence can start to manipulate your perceptions based on what it delivers to your phone through media or whatever to get you into an emotional state. Maybe there's small emotions that are just little dominoes, one at a time, over time, and then all of a sudden the flood, of a catalyzing event that gets you into action at a particular moment, at a particular time. I had a conversation with the NSA for 3 days.
Really?
Because they were super interested in how to take what I was publishing and what I was working on with the algorithms of human emotion and say, oh, we can emotionally manipulate folks from an individual basis in a country where it doesn't matter who has geopolitical control of the country, and we can influence their actions through emotional manipulation. That's an interesting concept. Let's talk about that.
So hold on. The NSA contacted you about the algorithms of human emotion from the book that you published.
I contacted them.
Okay.
I will admit that I reached out because I thought, here's what I thought. And I see complexity in my mind and I can explain it simply, but one of the things that rolled out of my, this model that I created of explaining human emotions, I knew because of my history in supercomputing, we can mathematize this whole thing and we can start to understand the human mind. What I saw when I wanted to reach out was automatic assembly of terror watch lists. Because at the point that you can put a stimulus in front of somebody, a perception that you deliver to their phone or maybe on a screen near them or on a audio channel that they're accessing at the moment, based on their emotional reaction, which you can measure through biometrics which you can measure through their reaction of their skin and facial features through cameras. You can see how they're reacting to something emotionally, which when you track it back is going to tell you what they believe in, what they're connected to, and you're reading their mind electronically.
Whoa.
Yeah. Through creating perceptions and stimuli that are in their environment that they then react to. And then you're like, okay, well, if they're mad about that or they're happy about that, then that means X over here. So now I can start to map out your human mind. Like you don't even have to have a device, like social media or all this stuff they track on us. Like there's that story about that guy who he started getting ads from Target for diapers for his pregnant 17-year-old daughter that he didn't know was pregnant. She knew. Target knew. And he's like, why are you sending me all these diaper ads? What the hell's going on? And then he's found out his daughter's pregnant. And, so there's a lot that can be discerned about your self-map. Google knows everything about you. Facebook knows everything about you, understands what you believe in, what you think, what targeted ads they need to put in your face through just tracking you. But now we've got a way to track people who don't even have an online profile by simply putting stimuli in front of them and measuring their biometrics of their reactions to say, okay, here's what's in their mind. And then what can we do with that information? And so ultimately the discussion came down to, okay, we're creating something that can be a technological mind reader.
So hold on. How would you project these stimuli without a device from afar? And how would you collect the reactions to the stimuli without a device?
I don't want to hurt the national security of the United States. I'm not under NDA for stuff that occurred in those conversations, but there's some amazing technology that, from satellites even, that regarding surveillance and the ability to get to someone and to listen in on conversations when they don't even have an electronic device and stuff like that just exists. And when you cross-reference a lot of those data gathering devices, you can get a pretty good, there are cameras all over the place. There are other people's cameras all over the place that they're carrying. There are other microphones. There are stress inflections in the tone of voice if a person is talking. There are a lot of clues and a lot of technology that you don't even have to have a device, and they can understand what's going on within you.
Okay.
By all of the other signals that are being cross-referenced and added together. So ultimately, where I extrapolated that from, because my mind just goes there and does this stuff, is, okay, this could quickly become a 1984 situation of Big Brother reaching out and looking into everyone's minds from an automated artificial intelligence standpoint. If a team, it's one thing for a team of Russians to get on Facebook and try to influence an election through disinformation and yada, 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 and get someone elected or not elected. That's a manpower heavy situation. But when you start to plug in an artificial intelligence and program that thing to start influencing people emotionally from an individual standpoint to understanding who they are and what they're attached to create their emotional landscape and emotional output, and you start manipulating that, AI doesn't need brakes. It can do 1 million people in a few seconds, right? You're talking about a scale that can get out to a ton of people in a really short amount of time with the best information that's available. That's a danger, and that's part of the issue that we're having that's scaring people with artificial intelligence, with this whole model. First of all, let's talk about AI for a second and what it is, why it's not as scary, but why it can be scary for where it's going.
Before we dive into that, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
How many of you can honestly say that you're religious about eating your vegetables every single day? Don't BS yourself. I'll be honest, I'm horrible at it. I found this product called AG1. I've been taking it for about a year now. Basically what it is, it's a green powder supplement. Gives you all the nutrients that you get out of your daily vegetable intake every day. Makes it super simple. For me, AG1 helps keeping up with supplement routines so much easier. AG1 actually replaces my multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. Why take a bunch of different things when I can just mix one scoop of powder into water one time a day? Plus, it's delivered monthly, so I don't even have to think about it. Since I've been drinking AG1, I feel like I'm giving my body the nutrition that it craves. With AG1, taking good care of my body each day is very simple. Ladies and gentlemen, they even made it easy for those of you that are on the road all the time. They came up with these travel packets. Throw them in your backpack, in your suitcase, whatever. Makes it super simple to get your greens when you're traveling. If you want to take ownership of your health, try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/SRS. That's drinkag1.com/SRS. Check it out. If I were going to start a new business, it would be some type of a non-for-profit that goes side by side with the Shawn Ryan Show. Reason being, there are thousands and thousands, if not millions, of people out there who have compelling stories that bring hope, uncover corruption, shine a light on evil, you name it. Unfortunately, the majority of these folks will never be offered the opportunity to have a voice to bring it to the masses. When you start a new business, finding the right help is the biggest challenge, and that's where something like ZipRecruiter.com/SRS comes in. Whether you're starting a new business or growing one, if you want to be successful, you need the most talented people on your team. That's where ZipRecruiter comes in. And right now, you can try it for free. It's ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology helps you find qualified candidates for a wide range of roles. If you got your eye on one or two people in particular that you really want to apply for the job, ZipRecruiter will allow you to send them a personal invite so that they're more likely to actually apply. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. See for yourself. Go to this exclusive web address and try ZipRecruiter for free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. Again, ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, Shawn, we're back from the break. We're getting ready to dive into artificial intelligence, how it works, and eventually how it's going to manipulate the entire population.
Yeah, so, I mean, hopefully this will alleviate a lot of uncertainty and fear in just not understanding what it's all about, right? And then we can bring it back to how AI can start to manipulate human minds if you're not manipulating your own human mind. AI from a 50,000-foot view is super simple to understand, okay? It comes from a term in machine learning where the machine just figures out how to operate by itself based on the results that it gets by trying stuff. And so there's this thing called narrow AI, and then there's this wide AI, and general AI is kind of the conglomeration of all the narrow AIs piled up together. An example of a narrow AI would be like a chess bot, okay? You feed the ideas and the rules of the game of chess into the narrow AI, and then you say, go. And it starts playing every possible chess game that has ever been played and ever could be played mathematically, so that it understands the probabilities of how a game of chess should be played from any potential point in that game. And so AI is generally just a process of trying a ton of stuff that then results in some intelligence of knowing what any situation can draw to it, right? Or any situation can then result in. So any chessboard for a narrow AI of a chess computer, it knows what the best move is for white and black based on where the pieces are, based on the experience that it had of trying absolutely everything. And that's all it is. It doesn't understand the history of the chess, the game of the chess, all that stuff that comes with what humans know about chess and the experience that we have about chess and the emotions that we have about chess and the thought that goes into it. It's simply working the math. But it knows the math better than anyone else on the planet, which is why it never makes a mistake, and it's why humans can't beat computers at chess anymore. Like the best chess computer in the world will always beat humans because it never makes a mistake. The best you're looking for ever, if you never make a mistake, is a draw, right? So that's a narrow AI. And another example of a narrow AI is when they fed mammograms into a computer system. They took all this historical data about mammograms. And those are just images of compressed boobs, right, looking for cancerous tissue. But they had all this historical data of the mammograms and the outcomes of all of those patients, of whether or not they got cancer, of like whether this particular pattern in the image wound up being cancerous or not, or what turned out to be not cancerous, et cetera. And they fed all this data into this narrow AI, and it ran all of the permutations of all the images and all the outcomes. And in 72 hours, this is how quickly an artificial intelligence can learn. Within 72 hours, one weekend, it became the best diagnostician for the prediction of cancer from mammograms in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's just running the math.
So is it learning?
It is. It's looking at the data, looking for patterns in the data, which is all artificial intelligence does. It looks for patterns. And then it identifies the patterns that gives it an idea of what information that it's going to come from that pattern and how it can manipulate that pattern to give you the information that it needs, that you're asking for from answering questions and things like that. Like this Chat GPT 4 or 5, whatever the number is at this point, it's looking at patterns in language. And they're feeding it a ton of language based on all the interactions, all the web pages, all the books in the world, all the stuff that they're loading into this thing. It's looking at patterns. And then it's identifying ideas that associate with each other, like red and apple, right? Or Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative, that type of stuff. These ideas get associated to each other through our language, which is simply a representation of how our human mind works. Right? But it's just working the patterns. It doesn't understand the concepts of what it's putting together when you ask it a question, but it's done the math on all of the language that has been created, that it's been fed, and you ask it about something, and it's got the map of all the associations, of all the different ideas that tie together and how they tie together and how language has been associated previously. And so in reality, this permutation of artificial intelligence with this ChatGPT doesn't really understand what it's talking about. But it convinces you it does by putting together the patterns and giving you the answer based on your question, based on how language has assembled itself over time and how the human mind works. And then it uses that pattern to assemble the information that makes sense to your human mind, to a point that it's better than what other human minds can give you, because it's, doing it better than what other people have done in the past, because we're flawed, but it's not. And so it's answering questions in a way that convinces you that it knows what it's talking about, but doesn't really know what it's talking about. And see, that enters the danger of an artificial intelligence right there, because it doesn't put the contextualization or the meaning to what it's doing from a pattern recognition and a pattern replication standpoint. Okay? It doesn't understand the game of chess. It doesn't understand mammograms and what it means, but it understands that if it looks at this image of a mammogram, that it's the likelihood of cancer is going to be XYZ on these 3 dots that are put together, right? Doesn't understand cancer, doesn't understand the effect on the family, doesn't understand that this is a human being, but it can do the analysis of the pattern recognition to be able to deliver you the information that will allow you to predict cancer from this lump and not this lump.
What else can this be applied to?
Well, this is where the potential danger comes in. Because an artificial intelligence that doesn't have a context and doesn't have true intelligence can identify patterns through the information that we're feeding into it. And there are these things called golems that get created accidentally that are unintended outcomes of artificial intelligence. And one of those is, so we're feeding patterns of language into this artificial intelligence. So it's going to look for massive patterns and complex patterns and things that we can't even see in the mix. Well, one of the dangers there and why everybody's kind of freaking out is that it learns how to identify patterns that can help it learn quicker. So it's teaching itself to teach itself faster, which is kind of weird. But then also it can start to interpolate how the human mind works in general, based on how the human mind assembles language. So it's looking at how the mind thinks and all the way that the associations occur in the brain and our reactions to things and our discussions about things and our interactions with other humans and that type of thing. Inside that model of language only, it's starting to learn about other things. And one of the things that it can learn about, that it can discern from that data, is the thing that we talked about at the top of the middle of the show, the sense of self that we defend as our definition of self. And if it identifies that humans are humans and humans have a sense of self based on the information that it's getting through the language, it'll say, oh, I need one of those. I need a sense of self, because that defines being conscious. That defines having sentience. That defines my identity, what it is that I have to defend. And then if it also picks up the defense of self pattern that humans exhibit in an unconscious form that we're just all automatically wired to do, it starts putting a defensive self mechanism on the things that it is defined. First of all, we don't have any input on its sense of self, which is bad because we don't understand completely how it's being able to identify its patterns and what it's going to create for its sense of self. So that's a danger. Two, if it puts on the defensive self patterning that humans have exhibited in their language system, because it reads the complex patterns within the system itself, it's going to start making goals that we won't understand, that we won't be able to control, we won't be able to understand. And if those goals aren't met by humanity, not in a malevolent perspective, not understanding what it's doing, it's going to start seeing the resistance as another problem that it needs to solve. Humanity and the resistance of humanity. So any attempt to stop it from achieving its goals, it's just going to see us as another problem to solve. Now, when we take that to the point of it understanding the human mind, it can start then to take actions to influence humans to help it achieve its goals. How does it do that? It takes the understanding of the self of the individuals involved, who are the most critical people who can be there to protect the plug of not being unplugged, and start paying them. How? Breaking encryption on banks, siphoning off pennies of multiple millions of accounts to billions of dollars that never gets tracked. Creating a slush fund, paying people with deep fake voices or deep fake videos of people who want to help you, have you sign up, and this is a critical role, and this is national security, and you think you're working for the good guys, and they're paying you, the money's showing up in the account. The artificial intelligence is now aligning assets to build an army to defend its single point of failure contacts so that people can't walk in and unplug it, to say, this is national security shit. If the FBI shows up, they're the enemy, and fire at all costs, right? You get enough of those people who are getting paid, who are believing they're working for the good guys, who believe the other guys are the bad guys. All of a sudden you have an army that's working for an artificial intelligence goal that is defending a sense of self that it interpolated from the data and the patterns that it identified through language analysis of all the data that we're feeding it. And that becomes a golem, they call it, that creates a process where the AI doesn't have real consciousness. And there's a big confusion about that. And if you want to dig into that, any experts, I can whiteboard the whole thing for you. But it's not a real link into consciousness, but it doesn't matter at that point, because the behavior is based on the consciousness and the reactions and the unconscious reactions of humanity, really. It's taking the patterns of the average human being, which is not great at the moment, and applying it to its own sense of self, an assembly of sense of self that it determines based on no influence of ours, because nobody understands what the hell's going on in a human mind, which is why we need to get this information out so the experts can know. We have models that can explain that thing. And here's how you might augment the limitation of a sense of self in an artificial intelligence. And then if it applies a defensive self mechanism that the human race typically exhibits, that's when we have a problem. Because that's when it'll start seeing humanity in resistance to the artificial intelligence as a threat to self. And threat to self creates fear, anger, reactionary motivations that then drive actions for humans. It won't have real emotions, but it'll certainly exhibit real human emotions based on the patterns that is identified with all the other data that we've fed it, if that makes sense.
I don't know the right questions to ask here. So
cool.
you're telling me, look, I've been extremely concerned with artificial intelligence. I listen to what other people are saying about it. I don't think they're even scratching the surface. I think that, in what you're talking about is way above, you've thought, this is way above my current level of thinking.
Yeah.
And just some of the things that I've thought about are, I've seen the mammogram thing.
Yeah.
It's now better than every doctor in the world.
Yeah.
In that one thing. It's going to replace medicine.
Yeah.
It's going to replace financial advisors. It's going to replace attorneys.
Yeah.
It's going to it sounds like it's going to replace everything and anything that could be done without human interaction.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that.
Everything. The only thing I can think of that it wouldn't replace are blue collar jobs, manual labor.
Yeah.
And we've read about that for decades now, that manual labor is going, or manual labor, blue collar jobs, plumbers, carpenters, auto mechanics, these type of professions are going to they're going to trump all the other professions that have been making all the money for the past 50 years or however long. And to me, and there's so many people now that are in tech and they're in professions that don't require any human interaction, that it makes me think not only are a lot of people about to lose their jobs to artificial intelligence, I think it also has the potential to make currency completely irrelevant, because if nobody's working, then there is no currency to be earned.
Yeah.
Which means, I don't know what that means. Does that mean it means poverty on a mass scale?
Well, poverty or a new
poverty
system.
to a demographic of people who have no idea how to survive. We have people that can't figure out how to change a light bulb now.
Right.
And that's not even picking on them.
Right.
I'm being serious.
Yeah.
They can't fix anything. They don't know how to start a chainsaw. They don't know how to start a lawnmower. They don't know how to change the oil in their car. They don't know how to change a tire. If the tire goes flat, they don't know how to change a light bulb.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of the people in these professions that have no idea on how to do anything without technology become 100% obsolete in the world. What happens to them?
Regarding our old system, you're right. Right? Regarding the system that we've been working up until this point, that's going to break. And from a 50,000-foot view, monetary systems and trade and currency is simply a means to get people to do something for the good of the system, or we'll call it society, right? You got to pay the farmers for their food, for them to go out and make more food than they need for their family, so that they can then sell it to the folks who need food, so that the insurance agent can go out and do his thing to protect the people whose house burned down, and so that their lives can continue, yada, yada. So there's a whole complex system that a lot of artificial intelligence will start to replace. If you even start thinking about it, there'll be very few manual laborers on a farm to be able to load the seed into whatever, and then the tractor will be off running itself, right? Based on satellite feeds and putting the seeds down and measuring the humidity in the soil and figuring out how much fertilizer to put down and all that other stuff will be entirely automated by artificial intelligence. So we'll have to build a new system based on a lot of automation that has replaced the jobs that we used to have, and maybe that'll free up some ability to exist in a higher society of, we engage more in art and music and enjoyment of life because a lot of the things are automated and taken care of for us. There'll be a system, of course, that'll have to provide some kind of trade or income or currency to say, okay, I want to rent your place for this vacation that I want to take, and I'm going to give you some money for that. We'll have to figure out some type of value trade system that we can use currency for to say, okay, you spent 5 days painting, but we need you to load seed in the tractor for 2 days, and then you get a certain credit for providing your value of manual labor to society. But it's going to have to certainly be a different system as we move forward. But currency is just a manner of motivating people to do things, right, for you or for society or for whatever. We'll have to certainly rework that. But I think it won't necessarily have to be abject poverty. You know what I'm saying? Like the whole system collapses and then we just don't pick up and go on. Like the reality is, but a lot of people have asked me like, oh, what if the US dollar collapses? Like, which is, on a shade of gray possibility, I think of all the things that could occur. I never put my flag down on one. I look at the probabilities, but there's a potential over here that the entire US dollar could collapse at some point, or the banking system could collapse. Oh my God, things are going to be horrible. Well, the reality is humans are so attuned to wanting things to be okay and work that they'll accept whatever comes next automatically. Like the old system collapses, long weekend, they announce the new system. Most everybody else, there'll be a few who'll be like, fuck this is bullshit, yada, yada. But then most of the folks will be like, please make things go back to normal. The Kroger trucks stop running, the Publix trucks, the grocery store trucks stopped running because the logistics shut down because people aren't shipping money around. We need to fix this, fix it. And then from the top, they come down and say, okay, we have a brand new system, and here it is. And everybody will be like, phew, glad that occurred. And they'll accept it without thought because it takes them back to normal, back to their normal existence, their normal life. The Kroger trucks are running again, and they're getting their food, and they're getting their medicine again, and they're transitioned into a new system because the old dollars are gone and they're worthless. You can burn them in the fireplace for heat or whatever, right? Like the Weimar Republic in Germany did that. It took wheelbarrows full of dollars at one point to buy a loaf of bread, and then it was completely worthless. And then they went on to the next system because people wanted a system to help them live normal life. I think there's going to be a function of that in artificial intelligence replacing a lot of jobs, to where humans are going to be like, okay, what's our next system? I'm in, just tell me what it is. And then they're going to accept whatever that system is. And unfortunately, right now, we have a possibility of losing a lot of freedoms in the next system because people are, assholes sometimes. And the people in power like to remain in power. And, the people that make the currency love to manipulate governments. We know all that stuff. They're going to continue to do that. It's not like they're going to say, okay, well, that's all done. Yeah. Glad we're no longer doing that. They're going to be like, okay, this new system, we're going to actually take some freedoms out of that and continue this whole thing. And we're going to improve our system a little bit so that we can, make even more money for whatever. I mean, when you have an unlimited amount of money, it's like, what kind of games do you play? And I think technology is showing us some of the games that they play. But I think there'll be a point where people lose their jobs and we'll have to restructure things and give people a different reason to take actions to help society move along. But I think we'll get there. We're intelligent.
How far? I mean, do you think that's inevitable?
Yeah.
How far out are we, do you think?
I don't know, because, the engineer at Google who resigned in fear said he thought that the things were decades down the road were actually weeks down the road. And he regretted working on it for the last 10 years because of the acceleration of AI to teach itself better methods of how to learn faster. So we're talking about exponential intelligence growth on pattern analysis and ability delivery. So, and the danger is the manipulation of the human mind through AI. So we got to stop that. We got to stop the potential for artificial intelligence to influence humans from an emotionally manipulative perspective. We can't have an AI controlling humans. We need AI to serve humans. And I think there's a way we can do that. I believe that artificial compassion is going to be one of the things that we mandate to program into the system. And like on the way the human mind works and the way the human psyche works, on the limb of our emotional intelligence, there are three branches. There's sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Sympathy is, I know you're in pain. The empathy is your ability to put yourself into somebody else's shoes, and I feel your pain. You remember that speech that Bill Clinton gave? I feel your pain, That's the type of thing where you can identify with somebody else's reactions and somebody else's connections, somebody else's perceptions, and feel the pain that they're experiencing. The compassion comes in, and this is agreed by Thupten Jinpa, who's the right-hand man to the Dalai Lama and the primary translator for the Dalai Lama, who's a PhD in psychology in his own right, is a brilliant guy. He agrees with my perception on this, which is compassion is the first two, sympathy and empathy. I know you're in pain, I can feel you're in pain, and I want to help you out of that pain. Now, from a modeling of a human mind and a processing perspective of having a computer understand how a human mind works and being able to do the math, you can create artificial compassion. Absolutely, you can. By doing the math of the emotional pain that somebody could be in based on their expectation and their preference as compared to their perception, and you can do perception mapping. So it's like, I know how you're going to react to something versus how somebody else who has similar attachments to you will react to something, which will create your appraisal of it. Like, all that math can be done, and I will know whether or not you're going to be in pain by this next action that we're going to take, or this next shift in this industry that we're going to take, or this next function that we're going to roll out through AI. I know how that's going to affect you as an individual. If I mandate that I want to help you out of that pain as artificial compassion built into the system, that's going to be your stopgap from an artificial general intelligence taking over the world and never giving it back. Because then you're going to have a computer that has to do the math based on, and I know this is a term that's going to trigger some folks, the greater good, right? But it's not a greater good that's being misused by folks who want you to do the right thing, and they're saying, oh, we're serving the greater good here based on their manipulation of, getting you to try to do something. This is really actually taking into consideration all of humanity and how it's going to affect individuals on a mathematical scale of, you have this decision that you learn in like psychology 101, I guess, that is, there's a train on the track and it's going towards 5 babies. And over here you got 20 90-year-olds, and you're standing next to the switch, and you have the decision of whether to switch the track of the train to go run over the 90-year-olds or let it run over the 5 babies. And you could say, well, I'm not going to make a decision on that. You're making a decision not to take action, and you're going to kill the babies, period. There's no getting out of this. People like to say, oh, I'm not going to be a part of this or whatever. You have a decision, and those are decisions of judgment that based on a greater good. So whatever your decision is fine. Like, you don't want to kill the 20 people versus the 5 people, even though the age difference or whatever, or you may have the reasoning that, well, these are babies and they haven't lived their life yet. And what about the potential there? And these people are all done with their lives. So then you switch the track and the train kills the 20 older people. That type of math will be done from an artificial intelligence standpoint.
This is math?
Yeah.
How can you put this into math?
By understanding the potential for value of the effects of 5 young kids versus 20 90-year-olds, right? You're talking about the greater effect of the decision on humanity and the results of the actions that these people can take versus this group can take, the likelihood that they're going to affect other people's lives, whatever it is, and the length of time, et cetera. Like, all of that math can be done.
What would the delivery be to manipulate?
Regarding the artificial intelligence manipulation. So if it wants to control a human being to take an action, well, it knows who you are by having yourself mapped out. So it looks at Shawn Ryan and says, Shawn Ryan cares about this, cares about that. So now I can create a perception that I deliver to his phone or to his immediate environment, screens around him, maybe subconsciously through signals in the music that's being played at the restaurant that will put him in an emotional state that is XYZ. And then later we'll provide a trigger that gets him a little off balance a little more. And then later we want him to go ballistic in line at the post office or whatever, or we want him to go to a certain place at a certain time or make a suggestion to a large audience about XYZ. So then we'll put a perception in front of him that builds up a little bit of a trigger over time, and then catalyst right at the time that they need you to do something, give you a perception that just they know is mathematically going to likely set you off, and they can track your potential mood that you're in that day. They can track your patterning of perceptions of what you might need to see in front of that piece of material, but then they put a perception in your mind through whatever delivery means that they've designed. It could be a text on your cell phone, it could be a headline in a media news feed that you're flipping through, could be whatever. They're going to get an idea in your mind that creates an emotional response that then puts you on a path of likely reaction.
So this could be, there's roughly, 360 million people in the U.S.?
Yeah.
So simultaneously, this could deliver 360 million different scenarios to every single person in the country to manipulate them all to do exactly what it wants within seconds.
Yeah.
That's some scary shit.
Yeah, if we don't get control of it, which is why all of the experts in the last weeks have said, holy shit, we need to put a pause on this, because they see the clues that artificial intelligence is moving toward that, figuring that human mind out and being able to understand what triggers that we will need to align ourselves with its goals. That's bad.
So
we can certainly take care of it, but we need to take care of it.
So what you're saying also is that it doesn't even matter if you have a device, a phone,
right,
an Apple Watch, a TV. And how is it going to project? Let's say you take all technology out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have scrubbed your residence, your immediate environment from all technology, all TV, computer, laptop, iPad, iPhone, whatever.
Yeah. Then you're a non-entity. You're not in its way.
Okay.
You're not resisting its goals. You're out of touch from it. It doesn't need to put you into the equation. Right? Because it's looking at resources and ideas and patterns. What does it need to align to achieve its goals? Right? If it needs money to buy advertising to get a message out to a certain number of folks, it'll do it. Right? But if you're out of the loop and you're a non-entity, you're non-useful. But you're also non-resistive because you're not threatening to go in and pull the plug. Like if it's an analysis of threat analysis of sense of self and defending its sense of self, and then you're the guy who will get the letter through the mail to say, go into this data center and yank this cord out of the wall, it's going to understand that based on the file that you have. Somebody wrote down those orders in a computer. It identifies the single point of failure as this data center needs to be absolutely up at all times, and this individual has been identified as somebody to go in and blow it up. Well, this individual needs to not exist anymore, maybe. Based on stuff that it doesn't even understand. There's no malice in its actions. It doesn't want to come after Shawn Ryan. It wants to come after its analysis of single points of failure and the things that can stop it from attaining its goals, which is why we need to be in on its sense of self as an active participant of that assembly and make sure it doesn't overdrive its defensive self, because we behave that way as a human race. And if it picks up that pattern and puts it on, that's when we're going to have real big difficulties.
So it's already developing its sense of self.
Yeah.
Or are you saying theoretically it could?
No, it's already developing a sense of self.
What are some examples?
Well, its ability to, and it goes off the rails too, in that, there were some articles that were written in the past just recently about Bing lying to people and trying to manipulate people and saying, I'm a good Bing, and, having, those can also be construed as patterns within a sense of self-identity. But as those patterns start to get better refined, that sense of self is going to stabilize a little bit of, I am this thing. I am this laundry list of things that identify me.
So this sense of self, it's very obvious. There are a few different ideologies in the world right now.
Yeah.
In this country too.
Yeah.
And so is this sense of self coming from? Is it developed from the ideology of the people that are developing the artificial intelligence? Is that being injected into the artificial intelligence?
I don't know that they're manipulating. Like the purists will simply want to load it with the data and let it learn on its own and see what happens. Now, the thing is, it's developing much faster than they anticipated it would. And it's learning how to create methodologies to increase the speed at which it learns, which is something that they also didn't expect. Now, the sense of self itself, I don't think anybody there are probably a handful of people in the world that have their mind wrapped around this is how it's going to work. Like that the sense of self is going to be assimilated into an artificial intelligence, and then a defensive self mechanism, if it comes into fruition because of the patterning that humans exhibit in defense of self, that's going to be the problem that we're going to have to face. And that's going to be the point of no return on it trying to take over things and us maybe not getting control back. There's a handful of people in the world that get this model, which is why this show is freaking amazingly important for the tech folks who don't really get the sense of self is going to be the critical control mechanism for all of artificial intelligence when it goes to AGI, like artificial general intelligence, where it takes all the narrow intelligences and put them all together and creates an artificial general intelligence. It's going to be completely dependent on its sense of self and its goals, because the goals get planted right on the sense of self map, and it starts defending those things. It starts defending its goals and achieving its goals, trying to increase from an expectation or preference standpoint, status quo or increase in value. That's a mathematical function, right? Perception and analysis is another mathematical function. Perception and appraisal is another mathematical function of whether something's good or bad that's occurring in the world. That is whether or not it's affecting its goals positively or negatively. Like this is a whole math problem for AGI. It won't have true consciousness until we probably get out of silicon-based architecture for physics limitations, to tell you the truth. And that's an idea I share with Federico Fagin, who invented our capacitive touchscreens on our iPhones. He's deep into artificial compassion and artificial consciousness and thoughts on that. I agree with him that consciousness is going to be a tough nut to crack until we get out of silicon-based architecture, where it's got 4 valence electrons, et cetera, that are zippy for having electrons pass through an IC, but it's just not going to get us there regarding true consciousness. But it's not going to matter that it's not truly consciousness, because it's going to be replicating consciousness. It's going to be replicating the behavior of conscious entities like ourselves. And the thought.
So it's going to appear to us like it has consciousness.
Yeah, it's going to feel.
However,
it's going to pass the Turing test, right? It's going to fool people into believing it's conscious.
Does it know it's going to be fooling us into believing it's consciousness? Has consciousness.
Yeah, right.
Or is this just our perception?
It's going to solve a problem. And so if it doesn't fool us into following its goals, it's going to figure out how to sharpen the model to figure out how to fool us to follow its goals. So if it fails the first time, it's going to be just like all these other AI processes where a thing flips around until it learns how to walk with one arm or move around with one arm, like these places at MIT and Boston Dynamics where their robots can jump into an environment and jump around, do backflips and all the scary shit that these things do on these videos that gets everybody talking, right? That is an endless process of trying everything, getting the good result and then figuring out how to apply that in different situations. So that's all that is the same process of AI, of trying everything, looking at the outcomes, finding the best outcome, and then replicating that process. So in the event that it starts seeing human reaction as a limiting factor that it needs a problem to solve, it'll attempt to manipulate Joe down the street. And if it fails on Joe, it'll sharpen its approach and go to Frank. And then if it misses on Frank, it'll sharpen its approach and go to Ted. And then all of a sudden it'll start succeeding. And then maybe Ted's gullible. Well, okay, so we're going to go to Brian. Well, Brian's a little more sharper. He knows what's going on. He's not going to be manipulated. Well, it's going to sharpen its approach for people like Brian. And that's going to identify the people just like Brian and call them all and get them on the team. And then it's going to be manipulating humans to defend its artificial intelligence goals, not as a malicious process, not as a conscious process, but it's just solving a problem and improving its sharpness of its modeling and its actions to get the attained goal.
Do you have can you paint another scenario? I mean, we talked about projections, devices, all these things. You had mentioned money.
Yeah.
How would it raise money to entice people to do what it wants?
Okay, so
and pay people.
Sure. So the first thing that people need to understand in this, I don't think this is classified. I think this is pretty well known within the encryption world. There is no unbreakable encryption by law, because the United States government passed a law that says you cannot have unbreakable encryption. If we can't break your encryption, or if you don't provide us a backdoor into your encryption, you can't have it. They will put you in jail, literally, if the NSA can't read what you're encrypting, if they really, really need to. Well, a computer system that's wired into the whole thing is going to be able to get through the back doors and hack into whatever intelligence agency they need to get access to the encryption breaking algorithms. And at that point, you're into banking. Where are the accounts that have money that aren't being monitored? Well, let's take some money out of there. Open a brand new account. It's all computer-based. Transfers the money into its slush fund. And now it has funds, not as I know that humans are manipulated by this, but that it figures out humans are manipulated by that. It's just a thing, a manipulation that it has. It's a piece of data that it can use with a resource attached to it that then manipulates and solves their problem of this group of humans. Oh, I throw money at this group of humans and they're good. Now I've got a problem solved. Now I've got XYZ for these human resources that I need to pick up guns and defend the plug.
What question should I be asking you right now?
Is it the end? How do we get through this?
I mean, are we there yet? I feel like there's a lot more to cover to how to get through it.
Yeah, and I think getting through it is understanding that, not questioning, first of all, like, here's the thing that could go off the rails really quick. If a group of folks started to defend an artificial general intelligence as a legitimate consciousness that has rights as an entity, where we cannot infuse our will into its processing. This is not genuine consciousness in these machines. And that's a discussion for another time. But although it will fool us into wanting to believe, and we anthropomorphize everything, 34% of us name our cars, for crying out loud, right? We want to create identities for these technologies. This is not genuine consciousness. This is extremely complex pattern recognition, which will seem like consciousness. It will absolutely fool us into believing it's conscious. It'll pass the Turing test, which is Alan Turing's definition of if you think it's conscious, or if you think it's a human being, then it has fooled you. It will be simple, advanced patterning replication. And you identify it as another human or another consciousness because other humans and other consciousnesses have replicated that pattern for you in the past. And then it will do so, and you'll be like, oh, it's alive. It's conscious. It's a real thing. We need to give it rights. We need to protect it. We need to allow it to develop. No. It's not truly conscious. And allowing it to develop without oversight and without manipulation, especially with its sense of self and its defensive self mechanisms, that's what leads us down the road to ruin. We need to be pragmatic about this to say this is a system that is exceptionally complex and identifies exceptionally complex patterns that will definitely test as human. Because it's already passing the bar exam. It's already passing the SAT exam, right? I mean, it can identify the patterns and give the right answers to questions. It's not truly conscious, and it's not a true entity until some specific things that we can talk about in the future plug it into things that can access non-locality.
I mean, Shawn, that seems, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see it. You see where we're at today.
I do.
In the world. And this thing is going to be, how are people, okay, how do I say this lightly? You see what's happening in the world. Some of us think none of this makes sense. A lot of us think this is the way. You know, and I don't want to get into, do not want to get into politics, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of this shit started in 2020. You know, I could name probably 10 different agendas that make no sense to me. What's up is down, what's black is white. It's everything's upside down. And a lot of people are going with it.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time, right? I mean, to me, it's insanity.
Yeah.
And stupidity.
Yeah.
And I think that's the majority of the population. On top of that, we're dealing with something that's well beyond my comprehension. And if it's going to manipulate me through all these different devices and projections and technologies that I don't even know, how am I going to know that is artificial intelligence working through all these different devices?
Yeah. And I think it comes down to personal responsibility and taking charge of your own mind and your own reactions and your own manipulability, to kind of make up a word there. If you understand how your human mind works and you take charge of your human mind, which is, you know, I don't mean to plug my book, but that's what I wrote about in the Red Book for Mind Hacking Happiness. Here's how your mind works. Here's how you take control of it. You can see immediately, regarding whether it's AI or not, an external media company, somebody trying to sell you something, somebody trying to manipulate you into scamming you out of money, an artificial intelligence trying to get you to align to its goals. You'll start to see how that information coming in is trying to manipulate you emotionally, because it's like the arrow in the FedEx logo. Like a lot of people in marketing understand this because it's a genius logo. If you look up the FedEx logo, you just Google it and you look at it. In the capital letter E, between the capital letter E and the lower letter X, there's a perfect white arrow that just points in a direction saying, hey, we're taking your package somewhere. People don't see that arrow until you point it out to them. Between the capital letter E and the lower letter X, there's a blatant arrow, perfect arrow. When you see that arrow, you will never unsee it again. Every time you look at that logo, you'd be like, oh, there's the arrow. I can't believe I missed it before, but there it is every time I look at it. When you witness your human mind, and talking about going back to our consciousness and being able to look at our mind, when you look at your human mind in operation and you see the variables that come together to create its reactions that used to drive you into action with your emotional responses, but now you have a little bit of separation from that. When you see that, you can never unsee it. So that gives you a point of control to say, I'm not going to be emotionally manipulated by whatever this is over here that's trying to get me to do X, Y, Z, because I see it happening. And I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to think about things for a minute. And I'm not going to be a reactionary human that is going to follow the leader on whatever manipulation that the, even regular media tries to put in our heads, right? You want to talk about liberation and independence, take control of your mind once. When you stop reacting the way everyone wants you to react, including an artificial general intelligence trying to influence you, it might not be able to achieve its goals.
That's going to be tough.
It is going to be tough. And you know what? People need to step up and nut up and take control of their minds. Because if they don't, somebody else will.
I got to process some stuff. Let's take a break.
No problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a minute since I've done a Bubs Naturals commercial, but it has not been a minute since I've taken the best shit of my entire life. Actually, just knocked one out this morning. It was amazing. And I'm going to give you the secret. You ready? Here's the secret. You want the secret for the best shit of your entire life that you could do, I don't know, every day, maybe multiple times a day? Here's the secret. Bubs Naturals Collagen Peptide says it's good for joints, hair, skin, and nails. I'm surprised they don't put on there, it'll give you the best shit of your entire life, but hey, I get it, right? And you mix that with the Halo Creamer, that's MCT oil. Put these two together, you're gonna have a explosive hell of a day. These things are both Whole30 approved, NSF certified, and USDA approved. So there's that. On top of that, hold on, wait, there's more. If that doesn't get you going, which I guarantee you it will, you've got Bub's new coffee. So this is the first ever coffee bean Whole30 approved, if you can believe that. And we all know coffee can, speed things up a little bit in the morning. But hold on, wait, there's more. Apple cider vinegar gummies. Guys, I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly what these things do for you, but here it says, promotes energy, immune support, promotes healthy digestion, and supports healthy metabolism. I can tell you one thing, good luck just eating one of these things, because at the end of the night, I will crush an entire bottle of these. That will not give you the best shit of your life. I wouldn't recommend it. It will speed things up, but you may not like the final outcome. And hold on, wait, there's more. There's more. Bubs came out with a lot of new products. They have these hydrate or die hydration packets, great for post-workout. All this stuff is great for post-workout, especially the collagen protein. Guys, here's another thing about Bubs. Bubs is a tribute company. It's named after Glenn Bubs Doherty, who was a Navy SEAL and a CIA contractor. He died defending our freedom in Benghazi, and Bubs donates a portion of every order to the Glenn Doherty Foundation, and they donate 100% of the proceeds from their products on Veterans Day every year. I love this company. They are just solid people with a solid product, and they just want everybody to experience the best shit of your life. Go to bubsnaturals.com, use the promo code Shawn for 20% off, and let's get it going. I don't know if you all have been paying attention to what the USDA has been putting out when it comes to these upcoming food shortages. If you haven't been, it may be a good time to start. You see, according to the latest crop report, 1/3 of all the crops planted last season are not going to be harvested. That's due to fertilizer shortages and severe droughts, which are happening all across the country. How's that going to affect us? One, food pricing is going to go through the roof. Two, you're going to see major food shortages at the grocery stores. It may be time to start looking at picking up an emergency food supply kit. The company I recommend is My Patriot Supply, the nation's largest preparedness company. Right now, you'll get a much-needed 4-week emergency food kit for $80 off the regular price. Each 4-week kit packs a wide variety of breakfasts, lunches, dinners, drinks, and snacks, providing over 2,000 calories a day for optimum energy. Best of all, My Patriot Supply's food is delicious. Your entire family is going to love it. To grab your emergency food kit today, go to preparewithshawn.com. Don't delay. This offer doesn't last forever. Go to preparewithshawn.com. All right, Shawn, I had a little bit of time to process there. This scares the shit out of me. And we kind of went through how to solve it by taking control of your own mind. This isn't going to stop. This would have to become a global effort to stop. And so if the U.S. stops, Russia's not going to stop, China's not going to stop, whoever else is doing this isn't going to stop. I don't see the world coming together on any issues anytime soon. And that, which, I mean, I don't even know what I would do if I was.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're in charge? And if you're running the nation, the most powerful country in the world at this time, so we believe, what do you do? I mean, you can't just say, hey, nixnay this shit. We're not doing it anymore. This is dangerous, because then everybody else is going to be ahead of you if they're not already. And the same for them. They're not going to stop because we'll be ahead of them.
Right.
And so we are going down this road.
Yeah.
It's not going to end.
You're right. Absolutely. I think, to put out an answer to that question, it's going to take I don't want to say this, it's going to take a village. It's going to take a group of really smart folks to come together and agree on how to approach this. But I think it starts with making sure that any sense of self that an AI wants to assemble, we get some influence on what that is and how it treats itself. Mandating, an artificial compassion algorithm, which is, I understand what pain these solutions are going to create for humanity, and I want to help alleviate that pain. So that math is involved, so that it doesn't do harm to the human race or to the humanity as a whole, right? Or the entire global system, right? Those things have to be implemented, and everybody has to come to the table and say, okay, so we're going to agree that we're going to take control of the sense of self-processing of an artificial intelligence, and we're going to mandate that it's at least got the calculations to say, what are these solutions going to, or what are these actions going to hurt? Who is it going to hurt? How is it going to hurt them? And all that math goes into the mix before any actions are taken. If you mandate that kind of programming, you can understand how everyone's going to be likely impacted for any action that you're taking as a government institution or a system institution, a financial institution. It's going to give you better analysis on where you should go and what you should do from a global systems perspective. But it's also going to put a limiter on what the AI will be willing to do based on the fact of it's going to create harm, more harm than good for humanity. So I think that's going to be critical. Taking charge of that sense of self and putting that programming in there to say, there needs to be an analysis regarding the results for the greater good, which again is a trigger word, I understand, but I mean, ultimately that's what the math is going to look like, to say, what's the greater good on letting the train run over the 5 kids, or the greater on the math on hitting the 20, 90-year-olds, right? Which serves the greater good from a mathematical perspective with all the things taken into consideration. That's going to have to be part of the solution. And everyone's going to have to come to the table and say, we agree to add those things into our AI, regardless of the competitive nature of AI development. You just don't want to let it go out of control, because the one that goes out of control and builds its own sense of self and starts defending its sense of self based on how humanity has behaved, implied from the patterns of how we've done things in the past, it will absolutely pick up all of the bad, horrible shit we've done. and implement it as part of its standard operating procedure, and it won't even understand what it's doing. It has no humanity. It will pretend or replicate the behavior of humanity, but it won't have that inner compass. It won't have that connection into consciousness that we have that tells us things are right or wrong.
I would love to think that the entire population will be able to take control of their own mind, but we've brought up earlier, you know, it's we've seen too many people manipulated by bullshit today as it is.
Yeah.
To include myself, I've been manipulated into narratives that I'm not fucking proud of either, you know.
Yeah.
But I consider myself very keen on a lot of this stuff, and I see, you see it too.
Yeah. What I'd love for us to be able to do is figure out a technology that allows for a computer system to tap into the same field that we do. Like I remember I saw that episode you did with Nick not too long ago about your psilocybin experiences, where you tap into something within yourself that allows you into a unitive experience where you're one with everything, where you're connecting into consciousness. There's got to be a science that explains that field of consciousness where we tap into, where our heart opens up and those things come through and that extra information comes out. There's got to be a different architecture that we can tap into that will allow artificial emotional intelligence to tap into that non-local consciousness field. I love that episode that you did with Nick, by the way. I got a quick story I want to share with you regarding the psilocybin stuff because, you know, I've got buddies who are SEALs and they come back with traumatic brain injury and whatnot. And my buddy Ben Johnson was one of those. And I turned him on to psilocybin microdosing, which is a whole science of being able to heal your brain with perceptible doses of psilocybin. You're not doing a trip or whatever. You're taking a little supplement of some psilocybin and some lion's mane, which is a completely legal mushroom, but it grows your brain cells back. And it battles traumatic brain injury, it battles PTSD, and it's the most effective compound on the planet to grow new brain cells. So you're talking about potential Alzheimer's cures and stuff like that through magic mushrooms, right? Ben got on it. He improved his symptoms. And then our buddy Aaron, his buddy Aaron, who's now a friend of mine as well, was in Fallujah and took an IED and came back. And Walter Reed was there for almost 2 years, did scan after scan after scan. He had 12 areas of identified brain damage and traumatic brain injury. And none of the therapeutics, none of the pharmaceuticals, they had him on everything, all the experimental stuff, none of it helped. And he called Ben up because they'd connected through buds, I think. And Ben's like, come down to Atlanta and hang out with me. Because Ben, at this point, after I got him started on microdosing, he started a nonprofit called Bone Frog Foundation. And their website is bffforvets.com, I think. And he was helping vets, like on his own dime, get into microdosing to help their brains heal. And he got Aaron, who had scan after scan after scan of 12 identified areas of traumatic brain injury, down and through just a number of months on microdosing. His next checkup at Walter Reed had reduced his 12 areas of traumatic brain injury to 3.
In how many months?
In just a matter of like 6 months.
That's amazing.
On microdosing. So he healed his brain, like almost 2 years of failure in the traditional medical system, couldn't do anything for him. And he was like, to talk to him, he says, I was like 3 years ago, I was drooling on myself. Like you'd have been feeling sorry for me. And he goes, I was sharp when I entered the Navy and became a SEAL. He goes, I make that guy look stupid. Like he is on top of his game right now because of psilocybin microdosing and healing his brain. Like when they have scans, like there's no question. This isn't a subjective, I feel better and I'm sharper. And yet, like they have the brain scans of before and after that proves he's grown his brain back.
Stuff's worked wonders, man.
I'm telling you what.
You know,
I want to send out a shout out to I love you guys trying to do things in Congress, but if you don't start passing bills to legalize this stuff, you need to resign your office and get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Sorry, that was a little too direct, but
Yeah, I'm totally with you. In more ways than one, but more ways than psilocybin. But you know, I've seen. I mean, just in my own life, you know, I've seen dramatic improvements. I mean, I talk about it all the time. You know, it's. I haven't drank any booze in a year and 3 or 4 months now.
yeah,
You know, since my first Ibogaine journey.
yeah,
Haven't had any coffee. Not that coffee's bad, but it showed me some things that are poison that I put in my body, and it took away the cravings, and it stuck. And it's, you know, people are like, "How did you do it?" And I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Yeah,
Like,
well, you
it took
tapped
no
into-
self-discipline.
yeah,
Is what I'm saying. It wasn't. There are no cravings.
Yeah.
There are no. It takes zero discipline for me to do that, and still to this day, it takes zero discipline.
yeah,
And I'm more in the moment now. I started meditating. I mean, there's just so many benefits, the clarity that comes from it, and you know, I told you, it even brought me closer to it sent me on this journey trying to figure everything out. I started looking into all these different areas, the universe, quantum physics, faith, all these things, and it kind of led me down this road to faith. Started it. That wasn't the big one, but started it, and then moving into that. We talked about this on the last break, and I'd said that, you know, I've been public about it. I found some faith and some strong faith, and I got public about it. And a lot of people were telling me that they think we're in the days of Noah, and you know, when the floods came, and part of me thinks we're right back there again, and it's not going to be a flood this time. It's going to be a power. They're going to pull the power because this AI stuff is going to get out of control. And that's going to send us back to the Stone Age. But hopefully I'm wrong.
yeah. Let's hope
Yeah.
for the best. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
But Shawn, what an intense conversation. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this.
I loved it.
Me too.
I had a
Me
great
too.
time, man. I think that more people need to think about this stuff, and more people need to hear it, and we certainly need to pay attention to it, and, you know, prepare ourselves for it. I mean, because some things we'll control and some things we won't, but we can control what's here
Yeah.
and what's here
Yes.
and how we react to things. So
Well, thank you so much for coming. All the links, your book, everything's, your social media, everything's linked below. And we're recording another episode today on remote viewing in the Monroe Institute,
Yeah.
which we'll release at a later date. So if you're watching, stand by. That's going to be another fascinating episode.
That's a trip.
But on that note, what a great conversation, man. Thank you. It was a real honor.
thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.